Hey there, welcome to Broken Arrow. This video we're going to have a look at the aircraft and their different types of loadouts, specifically their offensive loadouts, because there were some questions around this topic. So let's have a look. This is a Special Forces air deck, so this means I have access to quite a lot of aircraft for the US. Your mileage may vary depending on what type of specialty you have picked. Loadouts. What do I have available? There's generally a few different types of weapons available, such as the standoff missiles. This can be, in this case, a HARM, so an anti-radiation missile. In my deck, I typically have a couple of F-35s which have this particular loadout. One HARM and one JSM cruise missile. These two, in essence, fulfill the same role. The HARM is there to automatically seek out a target that has an active radar. AA. You want to be able to get a missile onto the AA. Now, in this game, it is entirely possible for the enemy AntiAir to actually destroy that incoming HARM. So, don't expect this to always shut down enemy air defenses. Also, enemy air defenses that don't have the radar active don't actually get hit by this thing. That is why I also have the JSM. This one is a cruise missile. You target this by pressing P and then selecting a target for it. It then goes off and does its own thing, which means I don't have to worry about guiding this missile. I don't have to worry about flying this jet into harm's way. I basically fly this aircraft in, wait until it launches the HARM, wait until I find a good target for the JSM, if I don't already have one pre-picked when I called the aircraft in, and then I tell the aircraft to leave. This thing doesn't do any bombing runs, it doesn't do any close-range battlefield support. I just want it to be as safe as possible. You also have a different option, the B-2 Spirit, for example. The B-2 Spirit can be loaded out with a lot of different types of kit. In this case, I have it loaded out with the Mark 82 500-pound bomb. This means that this bird, and you can see them all lying on the floor here, these have lots and lots and lots of bombs, but in order to actually drop those, you will have to fly over the target. Therein lies the problem. Because the closer you get to your target, the more likely it is that you will A, get picked up by enemy air defense, and B, get engaged by enemy air defense. This is where this stealth value comes into play. It divides the enemy detection range by this amount. So we're getting divided by 1.75, which means that the enemy AA range, which let's say might be normally about 4 kilometers, without radar, that is going to have more difficulty picking up this aircraft. If you compare that to something like a Globemaster, it's going to have a stealth value of 1. So if they have 4,000 meter range, they'll see you at 4,000 meter range. And potentially more than that. The best detector for enemy aircraft, typically though, is not your AA, but your own ASF. Because your air superiority fighters can have a very, very good radar, typically, and can see high altitude ranges at 12,000 meter range and a low altitude at 4,000 meter range. Now this nicely brings me onto those different altitudes. Because some weapons, such as those from the B-2, these get dropped from high altitude. This means the aircraft is going to be operating at an altitude where it is easier to be detected. So that Raptor, that can see you at 12,000 meter range. Of course, minus a stealth value that you have. Keep that in mind. Because a B-2 Spirit is definitely a beauty of an aircraft, and especially if you want to arm this thing with a nuke, which is also just a high altitude bomb, you'll be able to, most of the time, get this thing off. You'll be able to drop the nuke before your B-2 either takes too much damage or gets shot down entirely. On the other hand, you can try flying in with a couple of 500-pound bombs or 2,000-pound bombs or whatever of the other types of bombs that you want, such as the massive ordnance penetrator here. But you will always have to be over the target. Now, the LJDAMs are slightly different. They have a bit more range because they can be laser guided. I think you can drop them slightly farther. And the JASM, as well as the JSO, sorry, not the JSO, the JASM is a cruise missile. So much like the one that I showed you on the fighter here, this is a cruise missile. You don't have to risk the aircraft. But what if you want to do something a little bit more dangerous? And for example, you have a tank column or a BMP column, or a large number of troops that you want to get rid of quickly. Well, you don't really necessarily need 1,000 points to drop a nuke on top of it. You can do that with something like a Strike Eagle. You can also decide that you want to kit out an F-35A. This is where low altitude comes into play. Because if your aircraft flies at low altitude, it's going to have a much better chance of getting into a battle sphere, and the enemy AA is going to have far less time to respond to it. This doesn't necessarily mean that you'll make it out alive. It does, however, increase your chances of making it to the target. What you're looking for are bombs that have a shell trajectory high drag bomb. This means an aircraft is going to fly low. The bomb has a high drag, which means the aircraft still has time to make it out of the area where the explosion will happen before the explosion actually happens. Otherwise, you would just have your aircraft get caught in its own explosion, which of course is not exactly a good way to spend, in this case, 445 points. This F-15E Strike Eagle here I have loaded out with a couple of cluster bombs. This is pretty much an entire cluster truck. No, I don't mean the other word. This is literally a truck delivering cluster bombs, and it just does that. Which is nice, but what if I also want some other types of ordnance in there? Well, the Snake Eye is your alternative. Because the Rock Eye engages mostly vehicles, it does typically better at that, but it doesn't do that much against infantry. The Snake Eye does. This is a 500-pound bomb, again with high drag. Take note, if you mix and match, your aircraft will only drop one type. So if I have the Mark 84 2,000-pound bomb, which is a shell trajectory bomb, so I'm going to have to be flying high, I can drop this because I'm flying high, but I cannot drop that because I need to be flying low. So please keep this in mind. If you're going for a low-flying, let's say higher-risk aircraft, please take note that you have everything set to high-drag bomb. If you don't, you're just going to waste some of your ordnance. Unless you want to micromanage this plane heavily. In that case, you can get away with it. Because if, for example, you have this Strike Eagle, and you want to do a cluster bombing run, you get the cluster bombs in first by flying in low. Then you press V, that changes the altitude of the F-15. It goes up to high altitude, you turn around, and then you drop the 500-pound bombs. That is possible. I don't think it's likely, though. I don't think you'll live long enough to make it into the battlesphere and out of the battlesphere and drop all those bombs. It's just... it's not very likely. If you want to combine these efforts, and you want to go, hold on, I have something that has to be pretty stealthy, let's say a Nighthawk, and I want to do a low-run bombing run. Can I do that? Unfortunately, with the Nighthawk, no. You can't. These things are capable of throwing out bombs and some cruise missiles, but it is not capable of going in under stealth and using that stealth value to mitigate the enemy's detection, plus mitigate, the 12,000 minus the low altitude range. So let's say normally you'd be detected at 4,000, but the Nighthawk has such a good stealth value that you're almost getting detected by, was that 3,250 or something? You'd be able to get pretty close. Unfortunately, the Nighthawk is one of those birds that is not designed to do a low altitude run. And unfortunately, some of the other stealth value birds aren't either. 175, the Raptor, 175, but the Raptor is basically a pure attack aircraft. At least you can use it in an attack role. I mean, it's more of an ASF, it's a fighter. What about the Thunderbolt? Well, this is an interesting bird, because this can do a little bit of both. You can use this in a low-flying run, because these Mavericks, they fly in at high altitude, but if you have the A-10 coming in, it can fly in at low altitude. So you're going to be using that lower altitude for as long as possible. Then, when you're getting close to the tanks that you want to obliterate it, you pop up. That's what the aircraft does automatically, but then it goes up to high altitude, although be it briefly. And then it's very vulnerable to attack. So please keep that in mind. Your aircraft will be attacked. Then again, the Thunderbolt's kind of designed to be attacked. It has armor. If you're going to be using something like this, you can do an attack with a couple of Mavericks. But you can also say, well, it's all great and everything, but I don't want that. I do want to, however, have some cluster bombs. And I'll have some ECM pods. And I don't need a designation pod. In this case, you're getting a pretty survivable, low-altitude cluster bomber. The one downside that this bird has, it is not quick. This thing has a forward speed of 450. If you compare that to the Strike Eagle, you're looking at an 810. F-35, 810. This is what typically aircraft have. The 810, sometimes 900 if you're looking at a fighter. The Thunderbolt is not fast, but it is designed to survive. If you want to use the gun on the Thunderbolt, the Avenger, you're going to find that once again it does a pop-up. It goes into a sort of dive bombing mode and it tries to actually engage you with that gun. The problem then becomes, oops, high altitude, high detectability, high chance of being hit by enemy anti-air. So please keep that in mind. As for the enemy anti-air, what are we going to see? Well, you have all sorts of different types of anti-air, but typically they fall under a category where they're going to say, well, we're decent at fighting aircraft, but we're not very good at fighting helicopters. Such as the S-300 over here. This one is good at fighting aircraft. It can intercept missiles, but it can do nothing against helicopters. In this case, I don't really mind, because if I'm an aircraft, all I care about is, can I get intercepted by aircraft? Yes, this thing can target aircraft. And moreover, it can target things at low altitude between 600 and 4,000 meter range, the same for high altitude. If you turn on your radar, though, that changes. That high altitude range suddenly becomes 8,000 meter range. Yikes. If you fly in low, though, you'll be able to get 4,000 meter range plus 0.25, so that is another 1,000 range. So you're getting into 5,000 meter range. If this thing doesn't have the radar active, you're going to be getting even less than that. And of course, if you make use of terrain, if you can fly in a low valley or between a couple of buildings and make it difficult for this thing to get a good radar lock on you, you have an even better chance of flying in. Some weapons have a bit of both. You can see, for example, that the Tor here is a bit better, at least in its current configuration, at defeating low-flying aircraft. It has a 200 to 2200 and 200 to 1650. Now, the high altitude kind of gets compensated when you turn on the radar, because it goes high altitude times 2, low altitude times 125. So this is when it compensates for the low altitude and high altitude range, and that makes the Tor pretty damn dangerous, because it can engage pretty much everything. Although, if you're trying to shoot down a plane, this is not necessarily the best option. So, when you're looking at a plane, or when you're looking to use a plane, be very wary what sort of AA is there in the area. And there is, as far as I know, not really an easy way to remember what shoots what type of missile and what has what sort of altitude and range capabilities beyond playing the game. And just spending time in the game and figuring, oh, okay, I sent my, I sent my B-2 on a bombing run against a Tor and it didn't get shot down. Interesting. Or I sent my Warthog against this thing, my Thunderbolt, and it did get shot down. Why is that? Well, because its low altitude range is a little better. Also, this thing might actually shoot down the Mavericks, which could be coming off of that Thunderbolt. Alright, let's have a look at how this looks in-game. Let's do some bombing runs in practice, so you can see how this looks. We're going to start out with the high flying altitude. This is going to be the B-2 Spirit. What I want to do is carpet bomb Alpha. So I'm going to call in the Spirit. Please take note that the Spirit turns like a dump truck and is going to take a lot of time to line up. If you don't already get this thing lined up the way you want it to go, you're gonna get shot down, because this thing just will not turn. So we're going to tell the Spirit to come in. And the Spirit, in this case, is armed with 80 500-pound bombs. I'm going to say bombing run, and you can make this as big, as wide, as long as you like. I'm going to say we're going to do it like that. There comes the B-2, and you can see that already it's struggling to actually line up. I already waited too long, and there we go. It's already getting shot down. Take note also about how the B2 is not even capable of going to low altitude. There is no icon here that says, hey, we're going to switch to low altitude. So that is a bit unfortunate, but that is unfortunately the sad reality of this unit. I'm going to call on a Comanche just to scout. Now, this B2 is going to fly in, it's going to go boom, 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 and then it's going to try and get out. There we go. If this works in a real game against players or against the AI, it's very satisfying. However, good luck surviving the entirety of this run. In this scenario, there isn't a whole lot of AA, but otherwise, there very well might be. Alright, I'm going to tell you not to shoot. You can see that, yep, there she goes. B2 is down. In this way, I didn't really pay a whole lot for a B2. But if you're going to fly in with a nuke, yeah, you're paying a hefty price tag for that. Now, the alternative, the F-35, this is a high-flying aircraft, which is only loaded out with missiles. So the way I would use it, and I'm not even sure if there is any AA this time around, I'm going to tell this thing to come in. And with the F-35, I don't need to get close. So I don't mind if I'm circling around over my own air spawn. I don't really care about enemy AntiAir, typically, unless you're on a very small map. Because the enemy also has more difficulty seeing this particular aircraft as it is a stealthy aircraft. So with that in mind, I don't really care about pushing this thing too far forward, nor trying to mess with the altitude, because I don't need to. If I want to target the cruise missile, I'm going to say that is a precision strike, or press P. You're going to click there. The missile is going to cycle, and now I'm instantly going to evac, so press B. But I'm going to cancel that, and here's why. Let's say that there is enemy air or enemy anti-air in the region. If I want to get this aircraft out to safety, what I'm first going to do is press V, which will change the altitude. As it does that, it's going to still get attacked by man-pads, of course, but I'm going to have less chance of getting intercepted by enemy anti-air. And now, when I'm closer to my own spawn, I'm going to press B, and the aircraft is going to go back to base. It is a slightly safer way of evacing the aircraft. Now, next example is going to be the Strike Eagle. This is the cluster truck. I'm going to say I want the Strike Eagle there. And again, there is not a whole lot that this thing can actually engage. I'm going to immediately tell this thing to switch altitude and do a bombing run there. Even the F-15 is struggling a little bit, but at least it doesn't fly very high. It lines up a lot faster. There come the bombs. That's the cluster bombs going out. I'm going to immediately fly back low altitude. I do not want to get engaged by anything else. And I'm going to just press B and it'll go back to base. So this way I'm trying to keep my aircraft as safe as possible. And then the Thunderbolt, it's pretty much the same deal. Unless you tell it to pop up. Therein lies the problem. Unfortunately, I don't know if I have any any ground targets available for me here. Come here, Warthog. Yep, there. There is some shit running around. Alright, Thunderbolts. This is not helpful. You can see at least the Thunderbolt doesn't care as much. And here it goes. It pops up. And it drops cluster bombs. That's not exactly what I wanted you to do, but sure. Cluster bombs do work against infantry, just not really as well as you might like. They're gonna snipe this Comanche out of the sky soon. Come on, Thunderbolt. Get out here. No, I can't see them. Come on. Come here. There. Come on, buddy. Sometimes aircraft are a bit finicky, especially in tandem with the way that I'm trying to get my detection going. There's the pop-up. Hold. This is when the A-10 does the pop-up. This is when I'm at high altitude. So now, every enemy air and every anti-air system in the area, let's say there, or there, or there, or there, such as the S-300 is going to go, oh, that's a nice snack. I'm going to shoot that. So the A-10 Thunderbolt is fantastic in the gun run capabilities, but you are risking the aircraft. So please take note as you are doing that. I have, however, seen obliterate tanks like there's no tomorrow. There you go, that was the sniper team. And it can be so satisfying when you actually get to have this thing do its job. Personally, I'm not 100% on whether I want to load them out with cluster bombs, or Mavericks, or both. It's going to depend on the role. And therein lies another challenge for you as a player. How are you going to kit out your aircraft? How are you going to figure out what the right loadout is? That is very subjective, because, for example, the F-35, this is the way that works for me. This is the way that works for this deck. This is the way that works for my playstyle. You might use the F-35 in an entirely different role. You might say, well, that's great, but the F-35 in my deck is the best ASF that I get, so I'm going to have to put it out as a fighter. Make sure that stealth value exists to at least keep it as, well, as concealed as possible. It's going to depend on your deck. It's going to depend on the situation. And you can make an argument for example, the Thunderbolt having a Rockeye, so a low-altitude bombing run, and Mavericks. Because what if you encounter a situation where the enemy does not have a whole lot of high-altitude anti-air defense? What if you have shut down, or you just managed to sneak behind enemy lines and destroy the enemy AA? In that case, maybe you can go after those targets with the Gowade Avenger and the Maverick Strike. You can load these things out with ordnance for both, but it's going to require a bit more forward thinking and going, okay, in this case, I'm doing a cluster bombing run, so I need to fly low. In the other case, I'm fighting up against tanks, I can fly low, and then the aircraft will pop up, which might make it more risky. So you're doing risk analysis in these cases. Alright, that is an introduction to aircraft. There is, well, you could do colleges or you could do whole lectures about these. I hope this was useful to you. Let me know what your thoughts are below. If you have any things that I missed that you really think that should make it into the video, by all means, let me know down below in the comments. And, well, good luck picking out your aircraft for your deck. Again, it's going to be subjective, and I'm looking forward to seeing what works for you. Thank you for watching. I'll see you soon for more.